Welcome to the Healing Fucking Sucks podcast, y'all. I am not a doctor, nor am I certified by any board, but many of my guests are. I'm just a woman who has lived through extraordinary trauma, and I am on a healing journey. Come join me as I reflect and provide information on how to heal. Healing always fucking sucks, but it is so worth it. Hello, and welcome back to season 2 of Healing Fucking Sucks, y'all. As always, I am your host, Jackie Hall. Today on the podcast, we have Jessica Ann Pressler. She is a licensed clinical social worker. She has been a psychotherapist for 35 years. She has worked as a hospice social worker for 18 years. She has authored 55 mental health blogs on her website, contributed to articles and podcasts, all mental health related, and came up with the tool Traitor within to help people become empowered by gaining the insight into why they have repetitively sabotaged their happiness and well-being. She also has authored a book that is coming out early next year named Traitor Within. Jessica, welcome to Healing Fucking Sucks. How are you?
How are you? Thank you so much for having me here. I wanted to say one thing. I love your title. And since we're talking about grief, I wanted to just point out, and I did tell you this before, and that is when I do bereavement work, I have said more than once that grieving sucks. So I felt a connection to the title of your podcast because of that.
I'm so glad we connected. It's funny how the universe works, and I can tell when I'm aligned and when I'm trying to heal certain parts of me. I will get people like you on my social media that's like, ding, ding, ding. This is who you need to contact. This is what you need to be working on. With all the trauma and abuse that I've been through in my life, which is why I started this podcast, even though, the narcissistic thing is what really blew it up and really gave me the push for it. I had a lot of grieving to do. And you are a grieving expert. You have worked many years helping people learn how to grieve. And I find that so interesting because a lot of times I know at least for me, and I know I'm not the only one, people walk around and when you think about grieving, you just think about someone passed away. And that's grieving. We don't talk about grieving in depth when we talk about grieving our past or losing a job or a friendship, or there's a lot of other factors that grieving can come into. So that's why I have you here today. So tell us a little bit about you. I know your story, but the listeners don't, and it's a beautiful story, and it's kind of crazy the parallels that our stories have. Who are you, Jessica? Where did this start?
So I'm going to take you down a journey even to 7th grade, because in 7th grade, I was bullied, and really was the beginning of my social work. So I was bullied, and I wanted to give back when I was in high school to younger students who were being bullied and started to counsel them. I got permission to do so, and I would counsel the middle school age kids and then run groups when I was a junior and senior in high school, and wanted to be a social worker. I wanted to help people. I wanted to counsel. And so I went to college for psychology and went to graduate school as a social worker and started to work with people as a psychotherapist right out of graduate school. And so when you talk about grief, as you point out, is not just death. Grief is the loss of anything. It could be the loss, even happy things. Having the baby, being pregnant and having a baby, there's the loss of having that baby inside of you. Sending your child off to graduation, there's the empty nest, there's a loss there, but yet you're happy. So you can have happy moments and still feel loss. The everything that we talk about when we talk about someone who's dying, like the 6 stages, and there's a 6th one now, meaning of grieving, applies to any loss. And you talked about a narcissistic relationship. When someone is grieving after a narcissistic relationship, it takes on a whole nother, world of grieving, because you're not only grieving the loss of that person, but you're grieving who you thought that person was. It was usually nothing like what you believe they were, and the loss of time, and there's so much that goes into that. And so back to my journey. So I went through life, but I also went through many different relationships, including 4 marriages. I'm in a happy marriage now. That's the end, this story. But I went through 3 very unhappy marriages and unhappy relationships, narcissistic, abusive relationships, and stayed. So that's when I came up with the concept of traitor within, because I believe many of us, not all of us, but many of us have a part of us that sabotages our happiness and emotional well-being. For me, it was a part of me that was my traitor within that kept me in abusive and narcissistic and very difficult relationships. Where many people would have said, goodbye, I'm out of here. This isn't okay. This is wrong. I stayed. And that traitor that was formed by my fear of abandonment was in my childhood because I was adopted and because I had parents that weren't emotional and warm and fuzzy, and messaging that said, whatever your partner is doing, it's okay. You just make it better. You stay as long as it is. I watched my mother stay in a relationship that was a lot of infidelity. So she stayed. So I stayed in those relationships as well. And so after repeating these patterns over and over and over again, and after having all the knowledge and helping my clients not do that, and helping my friends not do that, and seeing things so clearly for them, I couldn't get it together. So I made it my job to figure this out. And that's how the Traitor Within happened. And it's for a tool for people to figure out their traitor and empower them to do better. So if you're in a narcissistic relationship, I don't want to overlook that there's trauma bonding and other reasons why we stay, but there's also a part that's about us too. And so if we can, so I teach people also about the narcissistic relationship. I teach people also about the trauma bonding and the manipulation of the narcissist. On top of that, you can't change another person, but you can do something to empower yourself, to give yourself the strength to lead, to look at yourself and say, why am I staying? Yes, they're manipulating you, but there's also a piece, for me at least, there was a piece. No blaming the victim. I want to be very clear. There is no excuse for being abused. There is never an excuse for that. But just, the power we do have is to learn about our traitor within.
I've kind of touched about it on my podcast a little bit, how we both play a role in toxic abusive relationships. There's the abuser and there's the one that is choosing to stay and be abused. But like you said, there's a lot of things and factors that go into that, like the trauma bond, all of the brain damage that goes on in the love bombing phase with all the chemicals, the cortisol, the oxytocin, all that that's going off in our brains that get us addicted to that person. Sometimes it's hard for us to take a step back and say, what are we doing to ourselves? Why are we in this situation? I feel like for people that didn't grow up in abusive homes or toxic homes, seem to have a little bit of a stronger mindset to pull themselves out of those relationships. But for people like me, and I know that there's hundreds of thousands, and like you, who grew up with maybe narcissistic parents or parents that had narcissistic traits and tendencies, and everybody around you, the way they talked was toxic, the way everybody treated each other was abusive, but this became your norm. Even though you might have escaped that and got away from that and changed yourself a little bit, your abuse level was already here. So if you start dating somebody and the abuse level is here, we tend to go, not that bad.
I said that I've gotten so low in relationships that I couldn't even do the limbo. I couldn't even get under that stick because I had allowed so much to happen. I just kept, you hold on to that moment of the good times, or you hold on to, and you just keep trying to get back like a drug. It's almost like a drug. But one thing I want to point out too, and we'll talk about, because we're talking about grieving, is I would go from one relationship to another. So I never took the time after any of these relationships to grieve. And when you grieve, you grow. And so without that grieving period, I never was able to get healthy. And I just did it over and over and over again. And I believe the traitor within had good intentions. She was trying to get me not to feel abandoned. That was my stick. That was my piece. So to not get abandoned means I don't leave. They don't leave me. I don't leave. I'll stay and tolerate anything in order not to be abandoned.
That happens so often. I was like you. I call myself a runner. I ran from everything. I started dating someone when I was 14 years old. That was almost a 5-year relationship. I'm 36 and this is the longest that I've ever been single in my entire life. And it will be on the 28th of this month, will be a year that I've been single.
How are you?
It's really given me that time that I need to figure out who I am, because I have betrayed myself, for a very long time. Because I feel better when I'm in companionship with someone else, and that's not a bad thing.
No, it's
But
not.
if you're
It's
not,
healthy.
it
Mm-hmm.
is healthy. But if your companion is abusive, then it's not
Mm-hmm.
good. And I never gave myself my path in my head was, I'll get into this next relationship. I'll focus on that relationship. I'll focus on them and me becoming who I'm going to be in that relationship, which would have not been my authentic self, because some form of it would have been molded around that person and who they wanted me to be and what our relationship was. So having this year to reflect and really sit down with myself and say, what does Jackie want, has been really revolutionary for me.
I can understand that, because when I was in a narcissist relationship, or someone with high narcissistic traits, as other people, you spend so much time focused on that relationship. What are they thinking? What are you doing? What did they say? Confused, whatever it is. It's all about, not making them angry or whatever it is. You're hyper focused on them and the relationship. How can you be your authentic self? Someone had asked me, what is recovery for me? And recovery was being in a place that I felt safe enough to be me.
Yeah.
And there needed to be away from that and heal in order to that to happen.
Yeah. And once you find out who you really are and you start to love yourself and you see the authenticity that God has given each and every one of us individually, which some people will look at another person and say that's weird. It's like, no, that's just who they are, like their little quirks or like whatever. When you really start to embrace those quirks and characteristics about yourself and say, this is who I am and it's okay, no matter if someone else has said that they don't like that about you before. I feel like there's just something so beautiful in that. And then from that, you can decide who is going to match perfectly with you, because they're going to accept you for exactly who you are, because you're no longer hiding anything.
Right. And you choose, you don't conform or contort yourself for them to choose you.
Yes. Yep. You're no longer trying to change to get this person to like you more, to attract this person more. You're just you, and then the right person will come along. It hasn't happened for me yet, and I don't want it to yet, but it will. Yeah.
Dr. Romani, I'm sure you know who she is.
Yeah.
I believe she recommended at least a year of not dating anyone after any sort of significant relationship, and maybe she said 2 years, but I think it's 1 year. And you said you're only at your year marks, and you'll know when I believe now you're at where you'll know when it's the right thing, and not when you're going to conform to make it.
Yeah, I knew, and I said on my season 1 final finale that I knew when I came to the point of no return this time. I mean, I had talked about how I picked myself up many times in life, but I knew that picking myself back up this time was going to be different. It is. I knew that this was the ultimate time and decision in my life to actually heal through my shit and stop running from it.
So it feels different. You didn't feel
way different.
Mindful of how you feel. Yeah,
really different. So let's talk grieving. Let's talk about, some of the normal grieving, and then let's get into some more stuff about what people typically might not think about, and how can we work through these things? How can we acknowledge them? It's so important to become self-aware of our thoughts and what we're thinking. Sometimes we might
Yeah.
be grieving something we don't even know that we are because we just simply are not aware of it. So that's why education's key.
So, as you pointed out before, that grieving doesn't have to just be the loss of a person or a fuzzy child, a pet, or, what we think of as more traditional. I think, well, first of all, I want to just point out also, society doesn't do great with losses in general, because you work for a company, the company will give you 3 days off for the loss of a parent, a sibling, and a child, probably. I don't even know, nothing else. So not a best friend, not a pet, not, anything other than that. So society doesn't recognize these other losses necessarily either. But I want to say that you absolutely can feel and grieve a loss when you have as good things, like I said. So if your child graduates and goes off to college, there's a loss there. Even so, you're happy. When someone has menopause and they lose the ability to get to have a child, it's still a loss. When someone changes a job, even if it's by choice, it can still be a loss. When someone moves across the country, as we both know, it can still be a loss. Even if these choices are what someone wants, there's still a possibility that again, it's a personal thing. You're feeling a loss. So it's important to recognize that and to be mindful of how you feel so that you cope with it. And there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Yes, I would tell you if you're at a place where you're suicidal, of course, or depressed where you're not functioning. Even not the suicidal part, but even feelings of depression is normal during the early stages of grieving, and important to go through. Now, some people don't grieve the same way as others. It's a personal thing. There's similarities, there's differences, and sometimes the grieving process, that's the official quote unquote grieving process that people will recognize, may not start for a period of time. So I want to caution people to never be judgmental about how someone else is grieving. You hear people say, why aren't they crying? Why aren't they this, that? First of all, no one knows their story. No one knows, that sometimes there's complications. Sometimes if you're grieving a narcissistic parent, for example, there's a lot going on there. And it's important to note that. And people just need to be kind to others, because you do not know what's going on. And I've seen it in groups where people judge other people's loss. I ran bereavement groups for a long time, and a person would say, or get angry, because they're in the anger stage. You got to have that person for 50 years. It's not fair. I only had my loved one for 10, or the other way around. I mean, people, but people are also in their grief, so you have to, to give some forgiveness, but you have to also, you don't want to hurt anyone else. Be understanding, because there really is.
Yeah,
and sometimes people,
that's like negating someone else's trauma because you don't think that they had as much trauma as you have. We need to be more kind.
Exactly. That's right. So what goes into how someone grieves? It's what you're grieving. It's your previous losses. It's the trauma you may have had prior to this grief. It's your coping mechanisms. It's your how you were taught to, how society taught you to grieve. It's whatever else is going on in your life. It's how you are physically. It's how you are mentally. It's so many different factors that go into it. So again, no one, as we both said, no one should ever judge another person on what they're going through. And also there's something called anticipatory grief. So if you know someone's dying, or if you know you're going to lose a job, you're leaving a job, or you are getting ready to get divorced, sometimes some of the grieving process starts before the actual recognizable loss. The feeling of loss can happen prior to it. One of my marriages, I left and came back, but I knew that final year I was going. And when I finally left, I didn't fall apart because I had done the grieving already. As an example. And I remember my friend saying to me, I've never seen anything like it. How come you didn't, cry? How come you didn't? And by the way, I did, but I did a lot of the grieving prior to that piece.
We also have grieving much like a narcissistic relationship, where let's say one of your loved ones gets like dementia and they're their old self anymore.
Mhm.
You're grieving basically a loss because this person, you know, has lost their personality. They've lost their memories. That person no longer exists, and then you're having to try to learn to accept this new person that's in the same body.
Right.
And then we can also to
Yes.
grieve old parts of ourselves
Mhm.
and old memory, old
Mhm.
relationship. People come and people go in our lives, and I know that I can have times where I look back and I remember these really great people that I have amazing memories with, but they're alive, but they're no longer in my life, and there's reasons for that. But I definitely have grieved that too. Now, I've never learned how to grieve ever.
Mhm.
I still don't know how to grieve. So, give me an example. Let's use me as one of your clients.
Okay. Okay.
And I came to you and I'm going to give you a real example here. So
Mhm.
I've never learned how to grieve. I'm in a healing phase of my life right now and I'm trying to deal with everything. With abuse,
Mhm.
with losses, with all this stuff. But right now I'm focusing
Mhm.
on grieving in my life.
Mhm.
I think because I went through so much trauma as a child that
Mhm.
when the two people in my life passed away, one being my
Mhm.
father when I was 21, and my
Mm.
grandmother passed away like a year right before him. I never
No.
shed a tear, and
Mhm.
I still haven't. I
Mhm.
know that I have not dealt with that, and I'm 36 years old. I know
Mhm.
that it is swept under a rug somewhere, and I don't even know how
Mhm.
to access that at this point, and it terrifies me of when it's going to poke its nasty head out and
Right.
collapse my freaking life. So,
Right. Because
what
you're
would you
afraid
say
you
to
won't be.
someone like me?
So my guess is you're afraid that it will take over. You won't be able to control whatever you're feeling. That it would just be when it happens. Well, first of all, normal. You're okay. I mean, I'm there for you if you decide you want to speak to me about it after. I who've been trained, when my mother died, I did cry a little bit, but I won't look at her picture. I still won't look at her picture. She died in 2010. So I still have
Okay.
not been able to physically look at her picture. I've had other people. I've had this one. I remember this woman came to my group 5 years after her husband died because she had young children. And so when he died, everything became about her sons. She had 3 sons who were still teenagers, but young. When the third son went to college, she collapsed. Not collapsed. She was able to handle it. I don't mean to scare you about that, but she was able to
Yeah.
start grieving. So for those years, she just put everything into them, and that's a more obvious way of it. But even me, like I said, so I have not yet fully grieved my either parent, because what happens to me is when I start to feel it, I push it down and I carry on, which is what I've been taught, by the way, to carry on. So what I suggest, if it's something that you cognitively want to start doing because you're not ready to, that you do see someone, a grief expert, and I would be there for you if you wanted, not as a friend,
Yeah.
and you start talking about it. But it's your coping mechanism. You're protecting yourself from not. But it doesn't mean you
I
don't
think
absolutely love her.
I've had so many moments in my life where people that know me know my heart and they know how kind and giving of a person I am. But then there's
Mhm.
also been these moments in my life where I just turn cold, like no
Mhm.
emotion, because
Mhm.
I don't know how to deal with it. And the people that are closest to me are like, "Are you okay? Like this is not you. Like you process
Mhm.
things. You try to figure shit out. Like you do all this stuff and you just cut this off like it never happened, like, you know? And it's because I just don't have the right tools. I don't have the right tools. So it's like if I have a broken car sitting outside and I don't have a mechanic, I mean, it's just going to sit there because I don't know what the fuck to do, you
Right.
know?
So you need the tools
Yeah.
and the tool. So what I would always suggest is seeing a professional, because everyone is different. So I can throw tools at you, but the truth is, everyone grieves differently. There's similarities, but they all grieve differently. I would suggest that you would see a grief counselor, or talk to me after, but you would see a grief counselor.
Yeah.
And with them. And I think that I definitely think people need support, that in anything that someone's going through, I truly believe that support is really important. I think people do better, heal better with support of others, either professionals or friends, who are loving, compassionate, caring, non-judgmental, empathetic souls.
Yes, it's been I'm really learning a lot about myself, like just downloads of information through my meditative states here lately. And I started feeling super isolated and lonely. And so I sat down, I had a conversation with myself, and I said, well, why are you feeling so isolated and lonely? And what came to me was, I don't really have, because I started my whole life over again. If you're not someone that is constantly growing mentally, spiritually, physically in life, if you're not trying to get somewhere in life, if you're exactly where you're at 20 years ago when I met you, I don't really have space for you in my life anymore. It's so important to have, like you said, support, people around you that can give you sound advice, that know what they're talking about. Don't go to, it's like, if you have a car that's broken, you're not going to take it to a chef and say, hey, fix my truck. So why would you take advice from people that have never educated themselves on it, or like in a healthy way went through it? Why?
Well, people also need to know the people you're going to advice for. They need to also understand where you are, because sometimes you also know that people may have good intentions, but they come with advice through their own glasses, through their own past, through their own trauma. And they may have good intentions, but they may just give you all they know. So to always do, in the end, do what feels right. You don't have to do what people tell you, because it may not work for you. They're coming with their stuff also. I definitely think so.
I just highly suggest people getting a professional. Get a professional. Yeah. It is not that expensive. I mean, honestly, it's not something that you have to do for months. Like, you can get a professional to say, just like contacting you and be like, please teach me how to grieve. I don't know how many sessions that would take, but I'm sure it wouldn't take a month, like.
And also to know that, if you're not comfortable with that therapist, you try another one. Don't feel stuck with one that it's not working well with. Keep shopping around, and find one that's relevant to what your needs are. So if you've had a lot of trauma in your life, or you are dealing with, grieving a narcissistic relationship, for example, find someone who understands a narcissistic relationship, find someone who understands trauma, because they will not work well if they don't. They'll be
absolutely not.
So
there's so many factors that go into that. Yeah, there's no way. That's probably some of the best advice. And everyone on my podcast knows that I've had my shopping cart out, and I've been through my numbers of therapists. And I've also had therapists that did work for me, but then after months, it was like they didn't really have any more information to like help further me from there. So I would then go to another therapist after that. So let's talk about what would a session look like with you? Like, how do you go through everything that you do to help somebody start learning how to grieve? Or do people just come to you and they don't even know that they're grieving? Is that like a thing?
Well, so obviously with hospice, when I go into people's homes and do grief work, they know I'm going there for grief, and that's a bereavement.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about what the others that come as a psychotherapist, but are not dealing with someone they love that had passed away. Okay. So someone comes to me and let's say it's post divorce, but after the divorce, they also had to give up, they had to split their time with their children. So, and they had to lose some of their friends, because some of the friends go with their husband and some of the friends go with them. And they now have to sell their house, and they're living in a different home. And they're looked differently, because, you talk about primary losses and secondary losses. So the primary loss in that situation, let's just say, is a divorce. I've now lost, I'm a husband, my husband is not. But the secondary losses is you're no longer a wife. You don't have your kids with you all the time. So now that changes. The new normal. It's always about the new normal. You are, you're living in a different home. You may be looked at differently socioeconomically. You may have to get a job when you're allowed to, be home. So it's so many changes that happen. For example, after a divorce, potentially. So if someone came in to me, they may come in and not realize that. So they'll come in and they'll talk about just trying to deal with the divorce. And I listen. I'm a big listener. I don't want to ever impose my what I want out of the session onto them. I want to know what they want. So I will listen to what they want. And if it is about loss, I will hear it and then point out, I would be very empathetic, and we would talk about these other losses as well. And we talk about a lot. I mean, self-care, self-love, do things that, let's say in the example here, they aren't seeing their children, two days out of a week, for example, and they've been with their kids every single moment of every single day until that point. So, let's fill the time with things that you love, hobbies, getting a new job, whatever it is. It's to also boost their self-esteem and to, it's all about creating this new normal after this loss, and to do things that make you feel good about yourself, to find yourself, particularly after narcissistic or a relationship with someone who has high narcissistic traits, where you probably lost a good chunk of you there.
Yeah.
It's about finding yourself that has nothing to do with that person, and boundaries and all that key in order to be able to grieve and move on. And move on doesn't mean you're not going to grieve. It just means that you're, starting to build a new normal. But especially, it doesn't mean you stop grieving. It just means that you're living the best you at that moment, which would hopefully keep getting better.
Yeah, well, I look at grieving as a step in the part of moving on, because I don't think you will ever fully move on if you don't do the grieving.
Correct.
So, okay, so what steps do you give people, like in that we're losing a loved one or lost a loved one? What does that process look like?
So if I go into their home before the loved one passes away, not only does the family potentially have anticipatory grief, and let's take a step back too. Let's say where the person that's dying has Alzheimer's. So we will, because you brought that up before, we'll go back to the family's already starting to grieve. They're grieving bit by bit, a very slow, potentially death of who they are. But then they have a new relationship with a new person, who it is. So and then when the person dies, even so they know it's happening and they anticipated it, there's still a loss as well. And the secondary loss there would also be, they were a caregiver. Let's say they gave up their job in order to take care of their mother, for example. So there's potential loss there. But I would come in and I would listen, and I would try to be where they are. And I would, help them understand sometimes, a lot of times people ask me, am I crazy because I think this, and I reassure them that they're not, that grieving is personal. But I do a lot of listening. And then when the person does pass away, I go into the home again and continue with them, and spend time with the family members who want me, if they want me. They don't always want someone to come in after. And listen to them again and assess, because everyone's process is different, but assess. And then I assess over time if they're, if they're not going back into society, if they're not, maybe they do need to have further help with like medication, but that's not in the beginning. That's, because they're clearly, the feeling of being sad is normal, obviously. And it could last forever. Someone once said to me in my group that grieving is like having a very heavy backpack on your back that's full of rocks, and you walk around where you can barely stand up straight. And over time, you stand up more straight, you stand up until you're standing up straight, and the backpack is still filled with the same rocks. So the loss is still there. It's that you get stronger. And, so I'm there for them. And what happens over time, is that they eventually will get stronger, ideally, and they will be able to smile every once in a while. But, people deal with things down the road too. They feel guilt. Guilt is something that people hold on to. For that one moment, they may have yelled at that person, or what they didn't go see the doctor with them for maybe if they did this or that. And there's a whole bargaining thing that happens, or all these stages that potentially could happen. And, but just there a lot of the time just to listen and to let them know that they're normal. And that's what groups do too. That helps with groups. because sometimes people who are there longer will help the ones that are new and starting the process.
I love that. Yeah, like you said prior, like support is so key to healing anything in your life. So are there certain stages of grieving? And what were you going to say real fast?
Well, you're about to ask about the stages. So I was going to, yes. So there are stages. Kubler-Ross came up with stages many years ago before she had passed away relatively recently. It's denial and anger and bargaining and acceptance. And I know I'm forgetting one, depression. And then there's a gentleman named David Kessler who worked with Kubler-Ross, who came up with the 6th stage, and that is meaning. And these are all stages that we believe now does not have to be linear. And not everyone has to go through each stage, but these are stages that people can go through. And Kessler felt like acceptance wasn't enough, that meaning had to be truly to be healed, finding meaning in the loss. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to find meaning in the death. It doesn't mean that. It means that maybe the meaning could be that you met very nurturing people that are there for you. The meaning could be you planted a tree in that person's name. The meaning could be you're doing a walkathon. It's personal. These things are all personal. But these stages aren't
positive to make out of the loss.
Right.
Okay.
And the stages are tools. These are tools to help someone understand what they're going through and to know that what they're going through is normal. But again, within those tools, within anger, within bargaining, and all these stages can occur during anticipatory grief as well. But all these
what's bargaining?
Stages. So if it's anticipatory grief, it's a little bit more like, okay, if I go to church, every day for the rest of my life, that person can live another 3 years. That's the anticipatory. Let me do what I can. If it's after someone dies, it could be more, I need to, bargaining of ways to make peace with it, or, because the person has passed away already, but it's more like an interpersonal, bargaining. Denial is not that you are in a delusion necessarily, although I guess some people could be that the person didn't die, but it could be, you just aren't acting like you're not letting yourself grieve. I mean, maybe what you and I are going through a little bit with not looking at the picture, and you're just, some part of you is allowing that person not to go, I think sometimes people feel that if they accept or they smile or they laugh and then they feel guilty about that, then they are, they're accepting it, that they're actually, not grieving anymore, or they're not sad and they feel very guilty about that. But the truth is, you can also smile and still be sad and still grieve about this person. But sometimes people do feel guilty if they smile, or if they
it's just like many people can still put on a nice face but be abusing their loved ones at home.
This is very true.
People can wear many different masks, and so, like you said, people just need to be kind. And that's funny, because at the end of every one of my episodes here lately, I've been telling all of my listeners to be kind. You never know what battle someone's facing. We're all facing shit.
That's right.
All of us.
And I think someone, I have a tendency to say hi to everybody. And I think that, I'm not saying why saying hi is doing this, but if everyone did that, you could actually potentially save somebody. You can, just by, someone being seen, someone being heard, spending 5 minutes and talking to a stranger can actually, potentially save their life. And yes, that sounds dramatic, but it's true. Or
no,
just,
it's very true. Because connection is so important. We were not made to be alone and isolated. So yes, I mean, I've heard stories where people were on their way to kill themselves, but someone smiled at them, or they got a phone call and it changed their total life. So that's so important. Do you have any more information on grief? Maybe you want to tell the listeners, for maybe someone that is grieving today, maybe give them some support tips, or just anything that you feel like is valuable about grieving that you would want anyone to hear.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one, there's no right, wrong. Don't let anyone ever tell you that what you're feeling is wrong. There's no right or wrong way to feel. To know you're not alone. There are support groups out there. I can give them to you if you want to put them in somewhere. But there are organizations. There are organizations that can help. There are obviously 911, but 988 is a suicide hotline, but it's also a crisis hotline. So you can always call that if you're feeling, because I think that for me, I felt it. I know my patients have felt it. There are moments where it's unbearable, the pain, that it just takes over. And to know that you're going to, just like with anxiety attacks, it will end. You will get through it, but it's unbearable at moments, especially the earlier time of the grief. It's just so painful. And to know that you can reach out to people. So I found with my patients, and the family members, they will tell me that. So if you want to help someone, let's say you want to help someone who's grieving, please check on them. Please, every once in a while, call in and say, what can I do for you? Or bring over food, because many times people don't want to ask for help. I know that sometimes people say, just call me when you need me. Know that I'm here for you. It's not enough necessarily, because people don't feel comfortable reaching out, or they're depressed and they don't have the strength to reach out. But how nice it would be to show up and even not ask for anything, show up and just show at the door and say, look, I just wanted to bring you lunch. I can come in, but I don't have to. Like, just, be there for them, but take that extra step, not just, I'm here if you need me, call me, because you will, it's better if you check up on them. But then listen to them. The other thing people should know is that they may change their mind. I did a blog on grieving during the holidays, and that people could, let's say you feel pressure to go to some event, but that it's okay to cancel last minute, and that the people who are having the event should be able to understand that you don't always know how you're going to feel. You don't always know how you're going to grieve, because you grieved a certain way for, Sam. When John dies, it could be totally different for all the reasons I spoke about before. But that is, previous traumas, your relationship with that person, how you are mentally health wise at the moment, how you are physically at the moment, a myriad of reasons, your support system. But no, you don't always know how you're going to grieve. There is always help out there. As I said, I will give you a list, but on my blogs as well, all my grieving blogs, I do have a list of places that you can contact. To know that you're not alone, to know that other people feel the same way that you do. There's always resources out there, and helping other people, just to be there for them and to check up on them. And touch. So I always, I know that touch is really important. Ask first. But just touching someone's hand, that warmth of touch, but you must make sure that they're comfortable with it first.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I did want to let my listeners know how important it is that you show up for people when they are in these really desperate times of need in their life, that you show up for them the way that they want you to show up. So you don't show up with your ego, with the way that you want to come at them. You need to drop all of that shit and just be there. Be there to listen and ask them before you do anything. So, like Jessica said, ask them if it's okay to touch them. Ask them if it's okay to hug them. Ask them if it's okay for you to stay. If not, just drop the food off or whatever it is you have, or a nice note just saying, hey, I'm here for you. You're not alone. That's all that needs to be said. Nothing else really needs to be said at all. So if there's any history there with a negative, toxic relationship, drop all that shit, y'all. It is not going to help anything. It's going to push this person further down the rabbit hole.
Right. And if you want to, yes, I agree with that. You're going to push them away. And if you want them to, it's better that you're there and you check in once in a while, so that if they need you, and then if you see that something is happening, if you see that they're isolating, if you see that they're actually getting depressed and you're worried about them, then get resources for them. If you have to slip it under the door, and or call a family member, and yes, it's okay to say, are you suicidal? It is okay. You're not going to make them suicidal by asking. It's okay to say, have you thought about a plan? It's okay to call 988 for them, and say or call 911 and say there's an emergency here. It's okay to do that if you feel.
Yeah. But really make sure that person is actually suicidal, when that happens. If they say, yes, I want to kill myself, then that's the emergency side. There's a lot of people that say that they're suicidal, but when you sit with them for a minute, they're really not. Was the best way that they could put it. It's like, the best way I can explain that is when you are depressed, you always want to die, like you don't care to be alive, but you're not going to kill yourself,
Well, by the way, it's not an uncommon thing to say when someone has just passed away that I want to die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to be with them. It doesn't mean they want to kill themselves. It means that they are so distraught. They want to hold them again. They want to be connected to them again. So yes, I do agree. The best thing you can do if you're not a professional is to get a professional to make the assessment.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 100%. Just say, hey, let's just go talk to somebody real quick and see, if you actually, do need help, or if this is just the normal motions of grieving right now. So I 100% agree with that.
Right.
Because I had somebody try to call the cops one time on my house just because I wasn't answering their phone call. Okay. It made me very livid. I have not spoken to that person since, because where I lived, had police and an ambulance shown up there for that reason, they would have booted me out, and I would have lost where I was living. So that became a not good situation. So, especially if somebody texts you and just says, like, I'm fine, I'm just going through a hard time. That's another aspect to look at it. It depends on where that person lives too. If they live in certain high-end apartment complexes, some of those places have no tolerance for that type of stuff. And
which on a side note is terrible for the complex, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
But that's terrible.
I do know.
But yes, I do agree. Yes, I agree.
So when do you think your book? What'd you say?
I was just going to say, but for the people that want to help others through their grief, don't judge them. Listen, just listen. Be there where they are, and offer to go grocery shopping for them. I mean, there's little things that you can do because they don't have the strength to do it, and don't get mad if they don't eat. Yeah.
The money for Instacart or Postmates, so they can just order their groceries to be delivered. If you don't have time to go grocery shopping for them, there's a million things that you could do. I know whenever I was going through all of my stuff, I mean, I was Instacarting everything because it was all the energy that I could do just to show up at my job and take care of my dogs. And I wasn't even taking care of myself, but that was all I could do at the time. And so Instacart saved my life.
I'm sorry for all that you've gone through.
I'm sorry for all that you've gone through, but look at where we are now. We're helping people, and that's life. We can use pain as a teacher, or we can let pain destroy us. And that's a choice we have to make. We all have that choice. We all experience pain, and we all experience it in different waves and ways, but we're all interconnected. We're spiritual beings experiencing it. We're just in a physical body. But if we stop looking at everybody as just people and how we're all connected to the universe, nature, everything around you, everything has a vibration. Even rocks vibrate, y'all. We're all connected. We were all born with the ability to feel pain and happiness and all of this stuff. And so we just need to have a better understanding of each other.
Right. I agree.
So, Jessica, you are phenomenal. I appreciate you so much for coming on the podcast today. Where can everyone find you?
So for all social media, it's Jessica Ann Pressler. My website is jessicaannpressler.com. And as you pointed out, there are 55 or more blogs, all mental health, 8 of which are on grief. And I do have a book coming out in the beginning of next year called The Traitor Within, which is a self-help book, but comes across as a salacious novel, actually.
I love that, because if it's sometimes when you're just writing your story and then you just kind of drop little hints here and there about like how you were healing, it becomes a self-help book without it being like in your face self-help book.
Right.
You know?
That's right.
So yes, I can't wait to get your book. I'm really excited, and I want your bracelets. I didn't have your bracelets. So Jessica,
yes,
she has bracelets. I'll tell them about that.
So, okay, I'm wearing it now. It's a bracelet like this, and it comes with a notice, which basically it's a bracelet. It's a Traitor Within bracelet, but it is to take care of. So I think the Traitor Within pops in. Your Traitor Within pops and comes there to help when you're triggered. So I called it's a trigger bracelet. So I have rubber ones. Sorry. Okay. I have rubber ones, which I would send to you for free, that anyone that wants one, just sign up on my website and give me your address, and I'll send you the free rubber bracelet. And I have and the other bracelet. So basically you're triggered, you look down, you either do this to it, or it reminds you of that instead of reacting to the trigger, to to do whatever it is, it's personal to you. If it's meditation, if it's grounding yourself, if you need to count to 5, whatever it is, you practice that and not react. And that's the Trigger Within bracelet. Yes.
I love that title. Yay!
Yeah, because
I'm so excited.
Thank you.
And I hope that when you, in my book, you spell my name correctly, because I got this book I've been wanting forever from a certain somebody, and she spelled my name wrong.
Oh no. Well, I will make sure I do, because I will send it to you when it comes out as a present and sign it. But I'm very attuned to that, because my daughter spells her name in an unusual way, and she spent a good chunk of her life having to correct people, so I understand.
Yep. I still have to correct blood-related people how to spell my name. I'm like, it's been 36 years. Right? We haven't figured it out yet. Okay, Jessica, I've been ending my podcast with my guest on the show leaving a positive quote or just a positive message. So do you have anything you want to leave my listeners with today?
Yes. Please always be kind to others, because you can change their life in a positive way. Words can hurt and can harm people, and can stay with people the rest of their life, but words can also heal. So just be careful with what you say to people, and kindness and love is vital.
I love that. So also too, guys, I'm going to leave you with, just please remember that you matter and your story matters. So tell your story. And I'm here for you as always. Everybody have an amazing day, and I will see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.